Hello, we are back again. Before we get into it, if you're getting value from Rev-n-u Unplugged, please hit subscribe, give us a like and leave a review. It generally helps us reach more revenue leaders. Right, here's something a lot of new CROs are getting wrong. They walk in the door and immediately go hunting for new logos, trying to prove themselves, smashing the targets out of the water in their first 90 days. And while they're focused on the fruit of the tree, the roots are rotting underneath them. Today's guest is Andrew Barker, CRO at ClearBank, a UK fintech that is disrupting the banking industry by bringing the SaaS way of selling into the world that's never really seen it before. Andrew's been selling for nearly 30 years. He was the first enterprise salesperson in Europe for Box.com. He helped take a German business process management company from UK sales director all the way to SVP of all of EMEA before it was acquired by SAP. And then he walked into a bank, found out the sales team couldn't be paid commission, that personal liability was on the table if anything went wrong, and there was no sales process, no methodology, no RevOps, and a CRM that was barely being used. And he stayed anyway, and he took ClearBank from 40 to 50 million ARR to well over 100 million. We're getting into how he did it, the big rocks he prioritized, why he stopped the business doing something everyone else thought was critical, what the modern B2B revenue engine actually looks like in 2026, and when actually you should bring a dedicated RevOps leader in. This is Rev-n-u Unplugged. Let's get to it with Andrew.
Andrew, welcome to Rev-n-u Unplugged. It's a pleasure to have you on the show, an exceptional sales leader with lots of insight I'm sure you're going to share with us today. We're going to be going into a bit of insight into your early days within ClearBank, where you are now, what you decided to do, how you did it, and why I think is really important. But before we go into that and start discussing that, it's always great for our audience to get a bit of understanding of who Andrew is. Particularly, I think it's important they understand who you are before ClearBank, and then it would be great for you to share actually how you ended up as the CRO of a fintech in the UK.
Great question, James. Glad to be here. So thank you for inviting me. Well, I've been selling for almost 30 years now. I did a degree in engineering. My first sales job was driving around industrial estates selling engineering software. And you had signs up that said absolutely no solicitation. So, as a bright young graduate, you can imagine you developed quite a thick skin quite quickly. So that was part of the challenge then. Since then, I've worked for many hyper-growth companies, mostly those out of West Coast US. So I've done my 10,000 hours, got my cuts, bruises, scars. Some of those companies are like Box.com. I was the first enterprise salesperson in Europe for them, helped them crack the code to sell their first multi-million pound plus deals. So that was exciting. They were doing about 50 million when I joined them, mostly in the US. I think now they've surpassed over $1 billion in revenue, had a successful IPO. Other companies are like Right Now Technologies, which is successfully acquired by Oracle. So as a salesperson, I would read pretty much every book I could get my hands on. I had a chance to test things out firsthand. As I say, got my cuts, bruises and scars. But anyway, then it was opportunity to move into sort of sales leadership. Had the first opportunity to do that in 2017 for a German-based company called Signavio, business process management company. And they had some funding, wanted to get international. So I helped open the office in the UK as the UK sales director. That quickly became the top performing region. So I was promoted to be VP of EMEA North. That was successful. So then promoted to be SVP of all of EMEA, which included everything outside of Germany. Anyway, March 2021, they successfully managed to sell out to SAP. And Apax were the PE company that had helped them get to that successful exit. And I got to know the senior partner. And when I finished there, I said to him, have you got anything that looks interesting? And he says, well, I've just bought a bank and we'd like to introduce the SaaS tech way of selling into the banking industry to try and disrupt it and make things happen differently. So I went along and met Charles McManus, who was the CEO at the time, got on really well. And as I say, yes, since then, everything else is history in terms of my position at ClearBank, and I managed to get the job as Chief Revenue Officer. I have to say it was a bit odd because a lot of the people that work for me are from Barclays, JP Morgan, HSBC, so a little bit of a fish out of water, I suppose.
I guess I'd love to understand what put you in the mindset to do this, because you have had some incredible success as a salesperson and then as a leader in a true SaaS environment. The banking world is so different, and you might tell me now that it's not that different. But what actually made you think, right, I'm on a good run, this is a huge challenge that could go either way? So what made you decide, because you probably had options, what made you decide that this was the challenge to go for?
Well, when I sort of did my due diligence, ClearBank had lots of happy customers, which was good. They were doing okay. They weren't doing too bad. You had the CEO, and I'd say a few good people, but they didn't really have anything that was scalable. So that was something I thought I could add value for. So, for example, there wasn't really a sales process. There wasn't really a sales methodology. Thin on the ground in terms of sales assets. CRM system that was hardly being used. Similar situation in marketing. So there's lots of opportunity I thought I could add to help them sort of scale and reach their ambitions.
Well, that kind of segues us nicely into diving into the detail of this. And that the first question I wanted to ask you was, when you walked through the door, what was the go-to-market team process? What did it look like so people understand where it was when you first started?
Okay, yeah. So my mandate was to design and build a revenue engine to help produce scalable, predictable revenue to get them from the 40, 50 million that we do at the moment to 100 million, 150 million, to 200 plus million. So really had to think about the current state. And as we said, some of the basics like sales process, methodology weren't there. There wasn't much of training or coaching going on. Not really a defined playbook. I was keen that I looked at the whole revenue engine. So it just wasn't sales. I had the marketing side of things as well. From a marketing point of view, doing okay on PR, events, LinkedIn okay, but not really around educational content marketing. So that was a gap. There weren't much case studies on the website, even though that was a fairly new website. Not a lot of science, if you like, being put into it. So there was huge opportunity. Things like client success weren't there. RevOps wasn't there. Partners and channels were there, but they were fairly lightweight and it's in its infancy. There's quite a lot of work to do, but there was a few big surprises when I walked into the door, which I only realized when I walked in. One was, by the way, there's now a very well-funded competitor with some pretty heavy hitters, including some MPs now coming into this market. So that was okay. Oh, and by the way, you can't pay the sales guys commission. Okay, so how do we incentivize them to do that? And by the way, if there's any sort of mis-selling or if anything goes wrong, you could be personally liable as well. So there were a few shocks. So I certainly have my work cut out.
Particularly with those bits there where you can't incentivize the salespeople with commission, and also if you make a mistake, you could be in. Why did you stay? What made you say, do you know what? I'm still going to give this a go.
I did think about it. I did think, what am I doing? It's a challenge. It's a real challenge. I trusted APAC. So what gave me confidence is it's really hard when choosing the right company to work for. Is this company going to be around? Everyone says they're the next big thing, but APAC do their due diligence. So I trusted them. I've got a good partnership with them. And I was excited about the opportunity. So I sort of put all that to one side, made me nervous, but I put it to one side. And from there, I think we've had some good success.
And you mentioned there that one of the first things you did was have an overview over everything, and you touched on marketing sales. So where I've seen a lot of sales leaders make a mistake is the first thing that they try and do is just impact new logos and try and smash their target out of the water when they arrive. It's almost like trying to prove themselves. What made you not take that approach?
Okay, so I'm a big believer to do things well, you've got to do the basics and get the basics right. So I study a little bit of stoicism, I have to say. I think being emotionally neutral is some good thing, but there's some good analogies. One of the stories is focus on the root of the tree, or the fruit of the tree. So one of those things is the fruit of the tree is if you focus on the results and you obsess about the results, you ignore the root of the tree, doing the basics, and the root rots and the tree dies. But if you focus on doing the basics and you have faith that you're doing the right things, inevitably the results come. So if you focus on people, process, culture, technology, the basic sales motions, and getting those nailed and getting those correctly done, those core hedgehog principles, the results do follow. And we can obviously talk about that in a bit more detail.
You arrived though, the business is doing okay, it's a bit scrappy, you need to get discipline brought in and processes in place. How do you go about not over engineering, doing too much at once, and then all the wheels fall off. There's no momentum and people aren't sure what they're doing. Kind of like Man United over the last 14 months where they're trying to figure out what it is and then they go back to a normal system and it seems to be working. So how do you stop doing too much or putting too much emphasis and bringing momentum to a stop?
It is a bit like flying the plane while you're building the plane. But if you want to build a big building, right, you've got to get the foundations right. So when the company is moving from startup to scale up, it's all about systems and processes and the discipline to follow them. So you've got to get the right foundations in place. But before you know what the right systems, processes, what the right priorities are for that company, you have to strip things back to the core. So in my 30, 60, 90, I spent a lot of time listening, learning, observing. And when you strip back to the core, you're looking for what's working, what isn't working. When things are successful, why are they successful? What do you keep? What do you throw out? So some of the things to look at are, does the organization have a North Star, clear mandate? Does it really know why it exists, sort of at a strategic level? Is there clear business value? Why do customers buy? What are the pains, problems, challenges the customers have? What are the opportunities you can help unlock? What's the culture like? What's the energy like? What are the things that get in the way of the deals being done? So what are the barriers to growth? As well as for me, for banking, I had to get on a steep learning curve and understand what's the marketplace look like. So I don't know, maybe that was a bit of an advantage because I didn't have any of the sacred cow burdens that a lot of people within the industry had. So once you've stripped everything back to the core and you've understood what you can keep and what you can't keep, you can then start thinking about where you prioritize and then start stat ranking things as to what you add. But as you say, it's a journey. It's not a magic wand, and you have to do things in steps.
How challenging was it? Because I can understand the looking for the North Star, feeling what the culture is like, the motivation of the people. But how easy, particularly coming from an engineering background, and I know we'll talk more about RevOps later on, but how hard was it understanding the data and the numbers without a RevOps presence when you've got in there and you had to understand that? So looking to give advice to other CROs that joined, because the business wasn't small. You know, you're looking at 45 plus million ARR when you arrived. So how challenging was it to get the information you wanted without a clear RevOps structure in place already?
You know, it's just a good question because that's right. So what you don't measure, you can't control. And what you can't control, you can't improve. So if you don't have the data, how do you know you're making the right decisions? The startups, particularly ClearBank, it was a lot of emotional feeling and instincts based on what was right rather than data validating it. And I remember Charles saying, need the data to make the right decisions. And that's why I come back to, sometimes you've got to be emotionally neutral. Sometimes you've got to be stoic. You've got to try and peel back the emotions from the facts. So one of the first things to do is to figure out, what do I measure? How can I measure it? How can I get some data point validations to make better decisions? So it is one of those key things. A bit of experience as well, which is why I think, if I'm a CEO, maybe hiring a CRO for the first time and I don't have the right foundations, I'd perhaps look for somebody who's done their 10,000 hours in the field, so that they've got a good instinct, but at the same time, perhaps have more of that engineering science background to have the discipline and understanding around systems, processes, data. Get those two things together, and I think that's where you get, in my opinion, the strong revenue leaders of today and probably tomorrow as well.
I totally agree. But is there any particular areas, if you've got a CRO new in the role, that maybe not be as good as the numbers or the data that other people? Is there an area that you would point them to say you need to investigate this, look at that, or start measuring something?
Yeah, if you don't have the data, you have to get different people's perspectives. So if you ask enough people, somewhere in there's the truth. So why are some deals not progressing? Why are some getting thrown out? Typically, it's not a clear understanding of what their ideal customer looks like and focusing on the right areas. So normally, if you can focus on the right areas, you can then start to get that flywheel going. You can then start to broaden it as you get more sophisticated. So I think you've got to understand, why is the company successful? So it's already got product market fit. What are the things they're doing well, and building it from there? But again, it's that stripping back to the core thing. Really understand that core of the business.
Makes a lot of sense. When you arrived, business was sub 50 million. Is scaled to over 100 million, which is a phenomenal job that you and the team have done there. How did you, when you looked at everything and you analysed everything and you saw what needed fixing. How did you decide to prioritize what to fix, and talk through the 3 or 4 kind of big rocks that you focused on first and why you chose to focus on those?
Yes, it's a great question. Great question. If we go back down to the focus on the root of the tree, not the fruit of the tree, the basics. So what are the absolute basics? So if you want to scale a business, you need a sales process. There needs to be consistent motions that people can follow that you can then refine and fine tune. So you need a sales process. You then need a sales methodology. And sometimes people get confused. They think a sales process is a sales methodology. They're 2 separate things. Sales methodology helps you track the health of the opportunity and helps you be more scientific on whether you're focused on the right or wrong ones and what you don't know. So those 2 things. We mentioned focus, so understanding what the ideal customer looks like, and pretty much being ruthless, getting rid of everything that doesn't look and smell like that ideal customer. Structuring the team to make sure you got the right focus. We spoke about the importance of measuring. So you need to start putting places to measure things. What you don't measure, you can't control. What you can't control, you can't improve, as we said. So one of the big things as well that can move the needle that a lot of people focus on, revenues aren't quite where they are. A lot of people think, oh, we've got a problem closing deals. The reality normally is you've not opened them correctly. They're putting a lot of focus in on opening the deals in the right way, having the right conversations, and that sets up the dynamic for pretty much everything else. So there were a few things. Obviously, from a people point of view, you have to start the process of getting the right people on the bus, the wrong people off the bus, but also getting the right people in the right seats. One of the moves from startup to scale up to be mindful of is getting the right discipline. As we say, if you're going to scale the business, you need disciplined people who can buy into that sales and systems approach and follow it and not be mavericks or lone wolves doing their own thing. You also have to create a culture of self-improvement. So if you're going to take the team you've got at the moment and bring on new people, one of the challenges I always make is, why is it world-class sports people, athletes, you ask the question, how much time do they spend down the gym? And we hear time and time again, Manchester United, matches are won and lost on the training field, not the actual field. And yet professionals in other walks of life, salespeople, marketeers, etc., how often do they spend investing in themselves on training courses, reading books? So you've got to establish this culture of self-improvement and have people leaning in, as well as discipline. So I'd say they're probably the fundamental things to tackle first.
I'd like to dive into the methodology, sales methodology and sales process. Why did that come up as something that you wanted to fix early? And how do you get salespeople to, because they are by nature characteristics, they are emotional, special individuals, and trying to get a methodology and a sales process at the same time must have been a challenge. How did you get them to buy into this new way of getting deals done?
Yeah, so certainly with ClearBank, there's a little bit of slow down to go faster. So in the banking world, what's good is what we have is people need what we've got. The question is why should they work with you? So our competitors are, some of the big banks, well-established organizations. Why should they work with you? So they want to work with a partner. So the slow down to go faster is really spending time on that discoveries page, understanding what the customer wants, what their motivations are, pains, problems, challenges, opportunities you can unlock for them. A lot of the time, the temptation is when people come to talk to you, the salesperson skips the steps in the sales process, starts talking price and negotiation with themselves, and then they're on a race to the bottom. That if you want to sell something at an enterprise level of value and be a partner, you have to spend time in the early stages. So it's really important to make sure we had documented steps that the salesperson knew explicitly what were the right times to move. Now, you start with a high-level sales process, but as you learn with the team, you can then refine and improve it. But having a process is better than having no process. In terms of the methodology, that makes sure that people are selling the right opportunities versus the wrong opportunities. So we use something called the close methodology. Very quickly go through if you'd be useful for James. So hopefully more people are using it now. But the C is the core fundamentals. So do you understand the customer's pain, problems, issues, challenges, right? So if you're going to build a sales cycle, do you have a good understanding of those? The L is all about understanding the leverage, why the customer needs to buy and why do they need to buy now. So those consequences of inaction. And if you're not clear on those, there's no urgency to buy and deals just die a slow death. The reason I like the close methodology over others, Medic's perfectly good. Lots of people use that very successfully. But the reason I like this one is the O is what's our game plan? So what are you, Mr. Salesperson, going to do about it? So my belief is, and this was good with banking, is vending versus selling. Oftentimes people just get into the process of facilitating a buy rather than making things happen. And my belief is salespeople are in the equation to make things happen, help the customer get value, help the customer see opportunities that they've not seen before. So our is our game plan. S is all about stakeholders. Do you have a champion? Do you understand the economic buyer? And the E is a reminder as to why us. That's the three things I encourage everyone to have: three clear reasons as to why the customer should buy from us. And if we can't answer those questions, there's no sale. And at a high level, the small deals, we do a very high level version of that is, why does a customer need to buy? Why do they need to buy from us? And why do they need to buy now? And if salespeople can't answer those three questions at the high level, there's no opportunity. They're wasting their time. They're being a victim of hope. They have to slow down, go back to discovery phase, listen, learn and understand. Discovery still doesn't uncover those things. Stop wasting your time.
I think a sales process is critical for, and all top performers follow a great process, and methodology is there to enable businesses to scale. How did you implement it though? And how did you get the salespeople to buy in to following these process and methodology? And how did you monitor it?
Yeah, that's the hard bit, I have to say. Particularly when you're going from startup and you've got a lot of emotional. So in a startup, the personalities tend to be more the creative individuals, the freedoms to test things, and you need those to win your first few customers over. But in a scale up, it's different. You need disciplined people doing the same thing, almost an army of people to make sure it's repeatable and scalable. Otherwise, you can't scale a bunch of individuals doing their own different thing. But it is winning that internal sale, convincing them it's better for the customer's going to get a better experience and higher value. It's better for them, and it's better for the organization they work for as well. And I think when people lock into that, you're good. Sometimes not everyone does, and the next phase of growth probably isn't right for them. People are relevant at different stages of growth, and it's probably time for them to go and help the next startup win their first few customers.
It's so important making sure you've got the right people on the bus, but like you mentioned earlier, on the right seat in the bus as well, I think is critical. There's something that you stopped doing, or you stopped the business doing, that everybody else thought was critical, but it wasn't. What was this, and why did you know it wasn't critical?
Yeah, great questions. Something that works well in startups, which is necessary, but can actually kill you in scale-ups, is custom builds, or custom anything. So, I've seen it before. I saw it at Signavio, actually. If you try and do custom product builds, like you may have done or agreed to when you're trying to win your first few customers in a scale up, the product function gets wrapped around the tire, trying to deliver these custom builds, which means the whole product production line gets choked up on those. You don't get any new cross-sell products. So guess what? You can't get the flywheel turning for that cross-sell motion. Well, not only that, you burden the business and weigh the business down, having to support these custom build products. But it isn't just products, custom agreements. If you do a custom agreement, you then got to manage and maintain that legacy custom agreement, and it weighs it down. So you have to be absolutely ruthless about standardizing almost everything. So that's why standardized sales process, standardized products, standardized pricing, standardized contracts. If you're not willing to get things standardized, you just can't scale the business. You just get bogged down.
So everything you say there makes perfect sense. How did you convince the board, the management, that? Because I imagine that played quite a critical part for their story in the early stage, or was what they tried to do. So how did you convince them that needed to be parked?
Yeah, it was more of, I had no problem. I mean, I think so. The exco that run totally get it. The chief product officer loved it when I said, we're going to not do a custom build. Exactly, that's what we need to do. However, what happens is everyone wants to try and do the right thing. So there'd be these side conversations where, somebody's got a big deal and somebody had talked to somebody about building something custom. And before we know it, something new's appeared on the roadmap. And it'd be like, what's this thing we're building here? Should we be doing that? So it is about, as I say, that discipline, and you need to shut those things down. And again, everyone has to understand the consequences of if you make those bad decisions, you do those custom things, just how bad it is for the business. So it is a case of constantly banging the drum. And I would say the job of the chief revenue officer I see these days isn't just running go-to-market. It's being an ambassador for growth across the whole business. So that's operations, that's product, that's legal, helping all of them align around growth, being that extra bit of firepower that the CEO has to make sure why it's so important people need to do it.
I think it's so important. Thank you for sharing that. Moving forwards, I would love to get your insight on what a modern B2B revenue engine actually looks like for scale. We're starting 2026. It looks like there's a lot of optimism out there. But what does a B2B engine actually look like now?
Lots of moving parts. So we spoke about the basics. So if you're starting, focus on those bits first. The modern revenue generation engine, it's become, I believe, much more of a science methodology than ever before, much more of a management science. So it's data system processes, constant experimentation to find out what works, what doesn't work, particularly those around AI. If something works, scale it. If it doesn't, kill it fast. And we can talk about that if useful. Measurement and metrics, we mentioned how important that is. The other thing I'd say on the modern revenue engine is because capital's more expensive, you used to have in the old world, go-to-market was all about execution and discipline would come from the financial departments. Sales execution, finance discipline, it's now integrated. You have to have an engine where margins looked at, there's new metrics. It's a completely new world with the cost of capital. So you have to look at that. I'd also say in the old world, you may have had marketing, channel, sales, client success as separate silos. They're now all part of one integrated function with one common goal under the CRO, getting rid of friction points, making sure everything can work in harmony. So having that, getting rid of those silos is super important. If it's useful, I do have on my iPad here, if it works, I've got a high level view of and I can very talk you through the different components, but that's sort of my sketch of what we implemented at ClearBank. But demand generation, so some of the key components you need to have in today's world are, because customers are now arriving with the internet and AI much later in the sales process, you have to have better ways to try and engage them and provide value earlier on. So things like PR is actually important, and we do that pretty well at ClearBank. So that's for awareness, making sure people are familiar with you and the brand. Good PR, CO, GEO now, educational content marketing is super, super, super important. Can't stress that enough. Making sure you understand who your key influencers are through channels and alliances is super important. Networks, there's a world of networks out there. You've got to make sure you participate, you're part of those communities, you're constantly contributing to those. So you've got marketing engine, partners and alliances. You've then got your BDRs and SDRs. The BDRs doing inbound leads, converting NPLs to SQLs. You've got the SDRs doing the outbound motion based on trigger events, targeting those perfect customers in your ICP. Then in the middle, you've obviously got the sales execution engine, where you've got the sales process, sales methodology, you've got the sales assets, you've got quality control that sometimes people miss. So you've got an engine, you've got to make sure, are people following it? Are you getting the right outputs? Execution management, which is a bit like making sure you've got a regular drumbeat and a regular focus. Then you've got the client success engine, which is the upsell, cross-sell, but also making sure you keep revenue. You haven't got a leaky bucket. You're not losing revenue when you don't need it. And then over the top, that's where RevOps comes in to help you enforce the infrastructure, systems, processes, bringing the data, but also owning the tech. We can talk about that. But remember, tech is only there to help you accelerate and enable growth. It doesn't create it for you. Sometimes I'm seeing people rushing into AI thinking they're going to create momentum. It doesn't. The core has to be working. It scales what you're already doing and amplifies it. And I've got the other parts, as you like, because that's the mechanical parts. That's me with my mechanical engineering mind. But then you've got the people parts, and sometimes some of these are forgotten as well. So you've clearly got talent management you've spoken about. You've got constant training, management, and coaching that's really important. But the other things that are sometimes forgotten is energy management, right? So I've got this thing, no complaining rule. You've got to make sure you mustn't be a problem. You can't be a problem sharer. You must be a problem solver. Mindset matters massively, and getting that right dynamic. So making sure you can nurture that. Time management, I try and teach the sales teams, have a positive expectancy, but at the same time have a productive paranoia. So you've almost got those two juncture positions. If you can get that right balance, you get that really, really good winning sweet spot. The other thing you have to have is standards and values. Typically, companies have values, but you have to have standards in the sales organization. So one of the things you have to address is if you've got high performers, clearly you should reward them, because sometimes people forget about the not so high performers. You have to take action there as well, because if you just reward the high performers, you don't take action on the low performers, everyone thinks, well, hang on a minute, I don't need that, nothing's happening here. Like, you end up with this mediocrity of being average, being okay. So having clearly defined standards and expectations is super important. The mechanical bits and the organic bits are all the different bits of the engine.
Makes so much sense. A couple of bits I want to dive into on that. It's a modern B2B sales engine. How important is it that the CRO has full responsibility for marketing, and should it report directly into them?
Yes, so I think it's important because, as I say, with AI, with the internet, B2B sellers don't necessarily always need salespeople. They can do their research earlier on. But the challenge of the salesperson and the challenge of the company is to provide value at every stage. So that means engaging them much earlier and much sooner. And you can only do that when you've got one person accountable for the whole revenue engine. Otherwise, what happens is you get this friction point where salespeople will be saying, but the MQLs are rubbish. Marketing will be saying that they've not followed up on the leads. All of that goes away when it's all part of one single engine. The same for customer success. You have the same problem sometimes, and that goes to a separate team. It all needs to be part of one ecosystem. For the investors and for the CEOs, they quite like it because it's one throat to choke. But at the same time, the top line is under one roof. So if things are good, you're fine. But if things are not so good, you're obviously in trouble.
And you also mentioned finance and legal being an important part now. So are you involving them in sales strategy, sales conversation? Are they involved more than what they were in the past when you've been scaling businesses?
Yeah, it has to be close partnership. So I make a habit of spending time with all the individuals, thanking them for the help they do. Finance, as I say, financial discipline, they're key stakeholders. Legal clearly touched pretty much every deal, but we have tried to standardize most of those and operationalize it. But it's the same for operations in banks, onboarding customers. I mean, literally, we have to say goodbye to good revenue if they fall out of a particular criteria because of our license obligations. So it has to be close partnership, and that starts at the top. I think around the Exco table, team number one has to be the Exco team, have to be part of one team, and then that can flow down through the rest of the organization when they get that one organization feeling. But the whole business is lined around growth now. It's not just the problem of go to market.
It's everyone's effort. It wouldn't be a CRO podcast in 2026 if we don't talk about AI, and you touched on it. Just want you to elaborate what you meant when you were talking about AI, the tech. How do you spot AI that's going to be useful rather than trying to shortcut you to quicker revenue?
Yeah. I'll say my way of thinking around AI, right? So there's lots of hype and there's lots of emotion around it. So my recommendation is you need to, again, use that stoic thing, be emotionally neutral. Ruthless experimentation and testing is absolutely key. As I say, if you find something that works, scale it. If you don't scale it. Getting empirical data and validation is super important. So I like to think of, it's not mine, it's from one of the people I used to work for, but I've kept it, is second mouse gets the cheese. So what that means is the first mouse doesn't work out too well, so you don't want to be on the cutting edge. Third mouse doesn't get anything, so moving too fast is risky, moving too slow is risky. So you want to find that sweet spot moment that's right for you, but you have to act or you become irrelevant. But remember, it's a constant pace of change, right? So the danger with AI at the moment is everyone thinks they're missing out. So if you make fast decisions when fast is happening, you're going to get killed. So there's this lurch to try and do something. Constantly renew and change your flywheel at the same pace, but test and trial what works. If it works, scale it. With AI in particular, two things I'll say on that for pass back to this, James, is my projects fail. The two things certainly that I've seen. Number one is the wrong owner. If it's in an IT innovation lab or IT testing, it only becomes an experiment of testing the corner. It never scales. If the person whose number is on the line is overseeing it, It's more you take it far more seriously, and therefore you can double down. The other reason is the business processes and systems that we have today have not been designed or built for AI. So it's not that technology doesn't work; they're just put on inappropriate systems. So you need to understand the fabric of the business and the way it works today, and what might not work if you start to automate things with AI.
And to give us some insight, where are you focusing your thought process on AI at the moment? Is it more around coaching and development of your salespeople of all staff, or is it more around research of potential clients, messaging, automation of messaging? Where are you taking time? Because obviously there's only so many minutes in a day you can look into this.
Yeah. For me, it's targeting specific business problems and issues that we've got first. If something's not broken, won't address it. So one of the things that happened, which happens to most people, is when Google turned on Gemini, literally we saw our organic traffic, which was really important to us. This educational content marketing, organic traffic just fell off by 40% overnight. It literally was a major shift. And I think all the marketing circles went crazy over that. So we got a bit of technology called Profound, and the old SEO world was all about obviously getting ranked in Google, earning the position, getting clicked through to your website. And the new GEO world is about training the AI on your data so you appear within the answer. So we implemented something called Profound to tackle that. So that was a business problem. You mentioned training. We've got a new team in Europe. I need them to ramp fast because there's pressure for Europe to grow quickly. Role-playing technology has been extremely useful for that. And so some tactical things. Another example of a business problem that we've got, because we're a bank, we get all the hairdressers, all the restaurants phoning us up. It's quite unbelievable, wanting to open bank accounts with us, but we're not that sort of bank. So I literally have had a BDR in the UK, filtering through all the 50 leads a day to find the one that might be a qualified lead. But go to Europe. 27 countries, you can imagine the problem. How could we manage the hairdressers and restaurant owners for all of Europe? So clearly AI, no brainer. It can speak all the different languages. It can work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, doesn't get ill. I don't need my BDR in the UK specialized in that. I can redeploy them and save hiring a bunch of people in Europe. Targeting specific problems, I would say with regards AI itself, biggest thing is going to be embedding it into the business processes and problems. And I've spent some time reviewing what they look like and have stack ranked opportunities on that. Go on.
It's an interesting topic. And I think, you're right. The training, the coaching, that's a great place, and you can see the impact. The other areas, where you mentioned there around marketing, perfect. Like you can really see how that is. It's the sales enablement side, which is the challenge, where you definitely totally agree. Your analogy of being the second mouse to the cheese, I think is important, because throwing everything into it when the systems aren't actually broken, people were doing lots and lots of deals before AI, and so they can still do deals without AI, but it's finding the right tech that suits your business.
Yeah, I'd also say, this is to all the salespeople, and any salespeople listening, is you've always had to provide value throughout the sales process. The thing is, with AI and with the internet, the access to information, you have to provide that unexpected value more than ever. You have to really understand that challenger sales mindset, because if you're not providing unexpected value, you're not needed and you're irrelevant. So you have to help the customer see pains, problems, challenges, opportunities that they just wouldn't get from their own research. Otherwise, the role of salespeople does come into question.
It does. Going back to the changes that you've made within your time at ClearBank, what was the time horizon that you had on these before you saw an impact of those changes? And answering that, how did you manage the expectations of the board around when you would see the impact? Because I think that's really important. I think communication with the board is a critical thing for a CRO.
Yeah. Okay. So couple of questions in there. Stakeholder management, the investors, the boards, you have to take them with you. So I was quite transparent of, this is what I think it is, this is what the plan is, and expectations of when we expect to see results. Well, realistic expectations, but obviously we're trying to overachieve those. Don't expect McDonald's standards day one. It's a marathon, not a sprint. It's all about getting that flywheel going and starting to go around, but then everything you do to try and get it go faster. So you want to take initial success and convert it into sustained momentum. So I joined in August 2022. Q1 2023, that was a record quarter. So we started to see the results within 6 months, so tackling some of the basics things. The key is then to continue to deliver the next thing, to then have a flurry of record results, which we did. Now, I can share some of the numbers because it's public up until 2025. It's not yet. But in 2022, the net new ARR that the bank was delivering was about 7.1 million a year on top of the normal revenue. That's the net new stuff. In 2023, I set the goal as we're going to do 13.5 million and net new ARR. And people were like, you never get past 10. Impossible to get past 10. That year, we did 17.1 million net new ARR. And we won £3 million plus deals, which we've never done before. In 24, we doubled it again to 34 million net new ARR and won £6 million plus deals, which we've never done before. Keeping that momentum, that flywheel going soon is really important. But I would say that there's only so far you can get to by exploiting the inefficiency. If you've got one product and you've got the current TAM, you have to create a bigger TAM, which means working with your peers. You have to have more products to go and sell to get the revenue going. So there's only so much you can do until you have to engage the other parts of the business. But it's all about getting that flywheel going. It's all about journey. It's all about focusing on the route, not obsessing about the results. If you do the basics well, the results will come.
Makes perfect sense. Moving on, you mentioned when you first went in, it was about looking at the current people you have, making sure you got the right people in the right seats. How do you spot a seller that has been crushing it for you guys in the early stage, but won't be right for the next chapter?
So great question. Yes. As we said, different people for different phases. So I think in the early stages, you need the creative individuals to help get product market fit, to win the first customers. It's more of an art perhaps than a science. I think in a scale up, as we say, it's more about the discipline to work together as a team and celebrate as part of the team, but also follow the systems and processes. So it's different people. What I would say before I sort of give you some of the tells and things to watch for is, in a scale up, it's all about the team. So as the leader, everything has to be to make sure the team as a whole can perform well. Now it doesn't take one person to make a team, but it can take one person to destroy a team. So some of the tells can be, if you've got people that are unwilling to change and adapt, if they're not coachable, if they're not willing to follow the 80% agreed sales process and methodology, or at least give it a go. Lone wolves, mavericks will cause disruption. They will disrupt the dynamic of the team. That it is time for them to learn what you can from them, but it's time for them to go somewhere else. You have to protect the team, that dynamic. So in the scale up, you don't just need one or two artists doing well. You need 10, 20, 50, 100, 200 salespeople, because that's the way you scale. Even if they never achieve the same amount of sales, as long as they're making the company money within the lines you've defined, why not have 1,000 salespeople? If you can have 1,000 people, make it much better than having 3 rock stars.
How does it end? Do you put the processes in place and it's like either you conform or you volunteer yourself out? So
to have a healthy environment is obviously anybody can contribute. So there's no bad idea, right? So as long as everyone contributes. But when we agree with the team, this is what we're going to do, and we all agree, the disagree then agree, then we move forward, and we must trust in the team and work together as a team. But if you get people agreeing and then going rogue, it can destroy the fabric of the team. You do have to have that conversation. Clearly there's a process you go through, but if there's constant breaking of it, there's only one conclusion you can come to, no matter how good or bad they might be.
How did you come to having this understanding that, there can be great performers that are great in the early stages that aren't right moving forwards as a scale up? Because effectively, CROs are still measured by revenue. If the numbers are going up, you're in a good place. So where did you learn that to remove someone who is effectively delivering good numbers and have the confidence that you will find a better person suited for the business and the next stage, and get the courage to stand by that and act on that? Because I think a lot of sales leads will be, well, I'll keep them there because they'll do numbers.
Yeah, it's doing the basics and having the discipline to do the basics. Any team sport, I mean, You look at building good. You see on good football teams, like you can have the most talented footballer on the pitch. And we've seen it many times. Like you can have lots of talented footballers on the pitch, but they lose to an organisation that's just a better team. So the more time teams spend together, the more connected they are. And one of the benefits actually of us not paying commission, which is quite good, is the team effort, the core for the team is much better. Paying commission, you can get some really selfish behaviour that's actually to the detriment. That in the new world, where margin's important, not having deal slips important, putting the company first is important, the actual discretionary annual bonus is really good because you can reward for those things over other things. And I'd probably have a hybrid of the two of it with me these days. I have a bit of commission, a bit of annual bonus of did you pay as a good citizen to incentivise the right behaviour. I'd also say that people should recognise what their superpower is and recognise when it's the right time for you to be on the bus and the right time for you to move on. I know mine is building, pouring the concrete for scale up. When it comes just to BAU and it's about cranking the handle and everything's humming, I'm probably not the person for it because I'm going to get bored and I'm going to want to tinker with something perhaps I shouldn't.
I think it's an important topic and I really appreciate sharing some candid insight there. Before I let you get back to your day job, last and I think quite a critical point, we're going to look at RevOps. And we want to talk about when is the right time to bring in a dedicated leader. I think really important that you mentioned here is what should they actually own? What are they responsible for?
Yeah, great questions. It's one I'm being asked a lot, actually. I mean, RevOps is one of the highest growing roles, certainly in the US, probably here as well. While there's no hard and fast rule, I'd say probably within 12 months of hiring a CRO. My VP of RevOps joined 8 months after me, which is perfect timing. The reason that's perfect timing is it allowed us to move much faster because as soon as I tackled one issue, they could then help me operationalize it and move it into BAU so I could move on to the next issue. So that worked really well. I would describe VP of RevOps as the right-hand person to the CRO. I would say if go-to-market was a car or a plane, they're like the navigator or the co-pilot, monitoring the dials, helping make sure you've got the right information to make the right decision, monitoring the health of the infrastructure and all those sorts of things. In terms of what they're responsible for, exactly that. Systems, processes, infrastructure, the data that lives within it, the technology that is part of it. And I've got sales ops, marketing ops, not got partner ops yet, but clearly that would fit under it with a big partner team. Deal desk, that's an important role. Sales enablement and bid management is what we've got under RevOps. So we've invested in the function because it's been successful. We have experimented with putting pre-sales under RevOps, and there's a reason for that. Pre-sales, the technical sales, hasn't been a big thing in banking, so we're sort of tinkering with it, playing with it for the more difficult clients. But we put that under RevOps for now, rather than having it as its own thing. But critical role.
So you mentioned that they within sort of like 6-9 months of hiring a CRO, but at what size of business? Because I think I'm right in saying that there wasn't RevOps when you joined ClearBank, but from what I'm seeing and what my head tells me, there perhaps should have been.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I mean, 40, 50 million we were at. Yeah, it's still a startup, but that's why when Apax invested in you need the CRO to get to the next level because you need to standardize, you need the systems process, you need to be far more scientific and data driven. And in their assessment as well, they concluded as well, you need a CRO and you need a RevOps. The reason they said both is for that reason, you can just go faster, you can make up some of the ground as you lay the concrete faster. I think it's what you can afford. But a startup phase, you probably want your VP of sales to help figure things out. I think when you know you're in scale up, that's when you should have a CRO, and then you should seriously consider, depending on how fast or slow you want to go, RevOps role. But Apax knew they needed it to move quickly, hence they did both of us at the same time.
I like your analogy of them being the navigation system, and I think everybody in today's world now can't go anywhere without navigation. I mean, how we got by back in the day before navigation arrived and we had maps, and they are the CRO's right-hand person. What advice would you give to a CRO who's hiring one right now? What should they be looking at from a skill set perspective, and what should we be looking at from that you've found successful from characteristics of someone that's right for a scale up?
Yeah, good question. Because the role's fairly new, there's not a massive amount there that are really good and well practiced. I mean, we were quite fortunate because there was two, world class. The guy I didn't hire went on to run RevOps, an organisation where there was 300 people in RevOps, so a proper big department. I think you want someone with an operational brain and a data brain. So they don't need to have done their 10,000 hours in sales and marketing. They need to be commercially aware, but good operational people that can think in terms of systems and processes. They can understand the data and the science behind it is what you want. So definitely more of that scientific engineering brain. I think the CRO needs to have a bit of both, because marketing's an art and a science, but they need the science bit as well in the scale up.
It's tough, but it's good to see so many businesses taking it so seriously now. I think it's a critical player, as you mentioned, the right-hand man for a CRA.
I'll tell you, the guy that I hired to do it has actually just moved over because he was so good. We put him into another part of the bank to do that. And one of the guys the story is that I recruited as a BDR in 2017 in Signavio. He came over with me here. Sales ops was what he enjoyed, just doing reports, looking at the fabric, looking at the operations was what he enjoyed. I've just promoted him to be head of RevOps. So now he's responsible for that whole function. So, kudos to him. But I've seen him grow and develop. So, yeah.
If you know, like, and trust someone, that's half the battle, right? So amazing. Andrew, I really appreciate all your time on this. We are coming right to the top of the hour. So I appreciate you taking time and sharing this insight. I think you've done an amazing job, not just at ClearBank, but everything else you've been doing. I think it's really important that you broke down and shared exactly what you did with ClearBank and how you got it from where it was, where you joined, to over 100 million now. And once 2025 data comes out, we'll know it's much further along than that as well. So thank you so much for your time.
Pleasure. Thank you, James.